1. The Haunting of the Old Barn. In a quaint little town on the outskirts of a sprawling forest, an old barn sat forgotten, cloaked in shadows and whispered legends. The townsfolk avoided it, speaking in hushed tones about the strange happenings that surrounded the structure. The barn had been abandoned for decades, ever since the farmer who owned it mysteriously vanished one stormy night, leaving behind an eerie emptiness and a lingering sense of dread. One chilly autumn evening, 4 friends, Mike, Sarah, Jenna, and Tom, decided to explore the barn, driven by curiosity and the thrill of adventure. As they approached, the wind howled through the trees and rain began to fall, drumming softly on the ground. The barn loomed before them, its rotting wood and broken windows exuding a sense of foreboding. Ignoring the feeling of unease, they pushed the creaky door open, which groaned in protest, revealing a dimly lit interior. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of mold and decay. The rain tapped rhythmically against the roof, a soothing sound that contrasted sharply with the tension building in their chests. As they ventured further, they stumbled upon dusty tools and remnants of a life once lived. The floorboards creaked under their weight, echoing like distant footsteps. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the loft above, causing them to jump. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her heart racing. "Probably just some old wood settling," Tom replied, though he didn't sound convinced. Despite their fears, they decided to investigate the source of the noise. Climbing the rickety ladder to the loft, their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. When they reached the top, they found an old trunk covered in cobwebs. "Let's see what's inside," Mike suggested, his curiosity piqued. They pried it open, revealing decaying journals filled with the farmer's frantic writings about strange noises, dark figures, and a growing sense of dread that had consumed him before he vanished. As they read the words aloud, a gust of wind swept through the loft, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic surged through them. In the darkness, they heard a faint whisper, "Get out." Their breaths quickened, and terror gripped their hearts. They scrambled back to the ladder, but the moment they stepped down, they felt a heavy weight in the air, as if the barn itself was alive, watching them with malevolent intent. When they reached the ground, they found the barn door wide open, despite having entered with it firmly shut. Outside, the rain had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung heavily in the air. It felt as though the barn had swallowed their fears, leaving them with a lingering sense of dread that something had followed them out. "Let's get out of here," Jenna urged, her voice shaking. As they hurried away, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Little did they know that the farmer's spirit remained, forever bound to the place he once called home, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to enter his domain. 2. The chilling phone call. Late one stormy evening, Sarah settled onto her couch, the rain falling steadily outside, creating a soothing backdrop. She wrapped herself in a blanket, enjoying the rhythmic patter against her window, a stark contrast to the growing unease that clawed at her mind. It was the kind of night where horror movies were best enjoyed, but instead, she found herself scrolling through her phone. Suddenly, her phone rang, cutting through the calm atmosphere. A blocked number flashed on the screen. Sarah hesitated, glancing at the clock. 11:45 p.m. Curiosity got the better of her, and she answered, "Hello?" The only response was heavy, labored breathing. A chill ran down her spine, and she felt a shiver in the air. "Hello? Who is this?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The breathing continued, deep and unsettling. Unable to bear it any longer, she hung up, heart racing. The rain outside intensified, each drop sounding like a distant drumbeat, echoing her growing anxiety. Just as she began to calm down, the phone rang again. This time, it was her own number. Confusion gripped her. "How is that even possible?" she muttered, her heart racing again. Reluctantly, she answered, "Hello?" "Let me in," a voice said, distorted and echoing, sending ice through her veins. Panic surged through her, and she slammed the phone down, locking all the doors and windows. The rain continued to pour, the sound growing louder, merging with the frantic thudding of her heart. Minutes later, the phone rang again. This time, it was her friend, Lisa. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I think someone is messing with me," Sarah replied, glancing nervously around the darkened room. She could almost feel the air growing thicker, pressing in on her. "Stay on the line. I'll come over," Lisa said. Relief flooded through Sarah, but just as she felt a glimmer of safety, she heard the voice again, this time coming from behind her. "You shouldn't have hung up." Terrified, she turned, but there was no one there. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as the rain poured relentlessly. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, and she desperately scanned the room for any sign of danger. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Lisa. "I'm almost there. Don't open the door for anyone else." Just then, the power flickered, plunging her into darkness. Heart racing, she fumbled for her flashlight, shining the beam into the corners of the room. The shadows danced, and the whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. "Let me in," the voice called again, now coming from inside the house. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She wasn't alone. Desperate, she backed away toward the kitchen, her breath quickening. The rain outside poured down in torrents, masking her frantic heartbeat as she looked for something to defend herself. With a sudden crash, the front door burst open, flinging itself against the wall. Lisa stood there, drenched and breathless, her eyes wide with fear. "Sarah, are you okay?" she shouted, stepping inside. Just as relief flooded Sarah's mind, a cold hand brushed against her back, sending her into a spiral of terror. She turned to see the figure standing behind her, its face obscured in shadows. It was now too late for her to escape the nightmare that had unfolded. 3. The cabin in the woods. Deep within a dense forest, nestled among towering trees, an old cabin stood alone, its weathered wood and cracked windows exuding an air of neglect. For years, it had been a place of whispers, locals warning of strange occurrences, and an unsettling presence that seemed to linger in the shadows. Despite the warnings, a couple, Alex and Megan, eager for a weekend getaway, decided to rent the cabin, drawn by its rustic charm. As they arrived, the rain began to fall, drenching the forest in a soothing rhythm. The couple settled in, lighting a fire to chase away the damp chill that seeped into their bones. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning illuminating the trees in fleeting flashes, revealing glimpses of the darkened woods. That first night, the couple felt a strange energy in the air, a sense that they were not alone. The rhythmic sound of rain against the roof was a comforting melody, but an unsettling feeling crept in as they noticed scratches on the cabin's walls, jagged and deep, as if something had tried to claw its way in. "Megan, look at these," Alex said, pointing to the marks. "They weren't here when we arrived, were they?" "No, they must have been covered up by the paint or something," she replied, though her voice lacked conviction. As they settled in for the night, the rain pounded against the roof, drowning out the unsettling noises from the forest outside. But as they drifted off to sleep, they were jolted awake by a loud crash from the back of the cabin. "What was that?" Megan gasped, gripping Alex's arm tightly. "I don't know. Stay here," Alex said, his heart racing as he reached for the flashlight. He crept toward the back door, the sound of the rain intensifying, mirroring the growing fear in his chest. He opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking in protest. The rain poured down, soaking him instantly as he peered into the darkness. "Hello? Is anyone there?" he called, his voice trembling. The only response was the howling wind and the relentless patter of rain against the ground. Suddenly, he saw a shadow dart between the trees. An instinct kicked in. "Megan, come here," he shouted, retreating back inside. She rushed to his side, her face pale with fear. "Did you see something?" she asked, eyes wide. "Yeah, I think so." "Let's just lock the door and wait for morning," he replied, the rain masking his anxiety as they huddled together, trying to dismiss the terror that gripped them. Hours passed, and the storm raged on. The couple eventually fell into a restless sleep, only to be awakened by a series of loud thuds against the cabin's walls. The sound echoed like a heartbeat, growing louder with each passing moment. "What is that?" Megan whispered, trembling. "I don't know," Alex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Just then, the power went out, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled for their phones, but the screens flickered to life only to reveal a chilling message. "You should have left when you had the chance." In that moment, the cabin felt alive, as if it were closing in on them. The pounding on the walls grew more insistent, a primal fear rising within them. They rushed to the window, and as lightning illuminated the scene outside, they saw the outline of a figure standing at the edge of the forest, watching them with hollow eyes. "Go!" Alex shouted, and they bolted for the door, adrenaline surging through their veins. They stumbled outside into the torrential rain, but the figure had vanished, leaving them questioning their sanity as the forest whispered secrets in the wind. As they raced through the woods, guided only by the flashes of lightning, they realized the true horror of the cabin lay not in its walls, but in the darkness that lurked within the forest. They ran, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever evil had taken residence in that forsaken place, knowing that the storm would not be the only thing haunting their memories. 4. The reflection in the mirror. Emily had always been fascinated by the old antique shop on the corner of her street. Its dusty windows and creaky door held countless treasures, each with its own story. One rainy afternoon, seeking refuge from the storm, she wandered inside, entranced by the relics scattered throughout the shop. The air was thick with the smell of age and forgotten memories, and the sound of rain tapping against the windows created a cozy ambience. As she explored, her eyes landed on an ornate mirror, its frame intricately carved with swirling designs. The glass was slightly tarnished, giving it an otherworldly quality. Something about it drew her closer, a whisper in her mind, urging her to take a closer look. As she peered into the reflection, the world around her seemed to fade away, the colors swirling and blending in a mesmerizing dance. Suddenly, she noticed a shadow moving behind her in the mirror. She turned quickly, but the shop was empty. Heart racing, she looked back at the mirror. The shadow was still there, dark and distorted, and it seemed to be watching her. A chill crept down her spine, but she couldn't tear her gaze away. "Just my imagination," she muttered to herself, trying to dismiss the unease that settled in her chest. But as she stepped back, the reflection remained, the shadow shifting closer, its presence growing stronger. She took a step closer, entranced, and the shadow seemed to reach out, fingers stretching toward her. Fear gripped her as she stumbled backward, knocking over a nearby vase. The sound shattered the silence, and the shadow disappeared for a moment, only to return with a vengeance. "Leave," a voice whispered, low and haunting, reverberating through the air. Emily gasped, realizing she was not alone. Panic surged through her, and she dashed for the door, but the air felt thick and heavy, as if the very space around her was alive, refusing to let her escape. The rain pounded against the roof, drowning out her frantic breaths. In a desperate bid, she turned back to the mirror, and in a fleeting moment, she caught a glimpse of something. A face, twisted and grotesque, staring back at her. It was her own face, but aged and hollow, filled with an anguish she couldn't comprehend. "Help me," the voice pleaded, and she felt an overwhelming sadness wash over her. But before she could process it, the shadow surged forward, shattering the barrier between the reflection and reality. Emily stumbled back, crashing into a table as the shop around her warped and twisted. She felt a pull, as if the mirror were trying to draw her in. The world faded to darkness, and just as she felt herself slipping away, the door to the shop swung open, and the sound of thunder echoed in her ears. With a final surge of strength, She broke free from the mirror's grasp and fled into the storm, the rain soaking her to the bone. As she stumbled down the street, she glanced back at the shop. The mirror glimmered in the dim light, the shadow now trapped within, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. As the storm rages on and the echoes of our tales linger in the air, we're reminded that the darkest corners of our imagination can sometimes hold the most chilling truths. Thank you for joining us on this journey through fear and suspense. We hope these stories have sparked your curiosity and ignited your imagination. Remember, the next time you hear the wind howl or see a shadow flicker, it might just be the whispers of a tale waiting to unfold. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more eerie tales that explore the depths of fear and mystery. Until next time, keep your lights on and your hearts brave, for you never know what might be lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary.